All right. Good afternoon, evening, everybody. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Yep. Excellent.
Yes, all good.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. We'll just start in 10 seconds while I make sure everything's set up. Cool. All right, we'll kickstart things. Good to see everybody again. Hello, everyone in this crazy world, wherever you might be. Thanks for joining us again for this second update on all things Australia, New Zealand, Gate 7 and our industry. Jo, I'm going to hand over to you to say a few words first.
Absolutely. Good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you again. I hope you're all holding up okay through the carnage. And despite everything, like us, hopefully starting to see a little green shoots of hope. You know, there is life springing back around the place, and we're starting to really feel hopeful again, despite ongoing uncertainty. For those of you who have managed to stay the course with us or have now come back, we give you a very warm, huge, heartfelt thank you. I know it's not easy decisions to make. Every dollar counts, every dollar's precious. And we promise you we're doing absolutely everything that we can to make that decision worthwhile and the right one. And for those of you who haven't managed to do that, we completely understand. We get it. It kills me to say that, but we get it. You know, nobody has easy decisions to make at the moment. Very, very challenging times. And regardless, we're all a big family. We'll always be here for you. And we look forward to continuing our relationship in whichever form that takes. As you all know, for those who haven't managed to stay on as commercial partners, we've been running a Keep the Lights On program, which the proactive component of that is coming to a close. So we wanted to give you a little bit of an update on that. And for those of you who are in the position who would like to just keep the lights on indeed, then we do have a little opportunity there that really only takes a bit of your own resource. And then, of course, we wanted to give you as much of an update on what's going on in Australia and New Zealand as is possible. Really, we really are still living in a great era of uncertainty. And so while we'd love to make everything crystal clear for you, there really is still a lot of fog around, but we will certainly, during the course of this Zoom, give you as much of an update as we feel is appropriate. So thank you again all very much for being part of our beautiful family, for joining us this morning or this evening, and I'll hand it back over to you, Tristan.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, look, I think we can all agree that this bloody pandemic has gone on way longer than we had initially thought or hoped or dared think. And as Jo said, today is just about giving you a quick update on how Australia and New Zealand are faring from various perspectives in our team, the pandemic, economic, border control, industry, and strategy moving forward. But, you know, as crazy as the world is, there's also still a lot of awesome. And we wanted to update you on our 3 maternity mamas who are still with us, but still on maternity leave. So Mel's actually now back in the USA. She's in California with Brady until early 2021. And Sophie and Vanessa are still rocking it here in Sydney and very much enjoying their time out with their little ones. So all doing really well, and Bubs are all doing fantastically as well. So let's move on. How are our countries faring with the pandemic? We're just going to skim over the numbers today, but well, for better or for worse, you know, as we explained before, we Australia and New Zealand led with a health-focused strategy to really keep the spread of the virus to a minimum. And as a result, our numbers of the virus itself have been kept, you know, very low. Just briefly, just so you know where we're at, in total, we've had 905 deaths in Australia, 25 in New Zealand, and really, as it stands, we have about 217 active cases in Australia and 4 in New Zealand. So that means cases that were transmitted here locally. There are more that are in quarantine from returned travellers, but really, in terms of community spread, it really is close to being eliminated. In Australia, Victoria is coming out of its second lockdown with a few restrictions. And, really most states are all open to each other. New Zealand is completely open domestically. And the full Australian and New Zealand bubble is slated to be open before Christmas, which is very exciting for both countries. And really, from a health perspective, other than some social distancing rules, restaurants are open, pubs are open, schools are open, people are traveling and things are relatively normal. There are a lot of people are working from home, partly, and some of us are in the office, we're in the office today. And really, because of that sense of normality, money is really flowing around the economy better than I think it is in many countries around the world. So that's some positives here. And obviously that's all, well and good for us here, but the big reason for that success is that they slam closed the borders. And as yet, we really don't have a clear timeline or strategy for how that will be eased. We know that the number one thing you'd like to get out of this presentation today is when we think the borders will open, but the reality is we just don't know at this time. I mean, ultimately, what the conversation is right now is that we need a strategic framework for reopening, and positively, momentum is really shifting towards that. As I said, Australia and New Zealand has led with a health first focus, but there has been no strategic framework put in place for us opening our borders to the world. And now there really is a sense that we have to adjust and learn to live with the virus being here for some time. Closing ourselves off to the world is just not a viable solution. So vaccine or not, there is mounting pressure to create a strategic framework for reopening. And what's happening is that our governments are having lots of conversations, state-wise and national-wise, and they're really keeping the public out of the loop regarding those discussions as to what's happening. And a case in point is just last week, or 1.5 weeks ago, Kiwis started flying to Australia, and that really sort of came out of nowhere. There was the talk of the bubble opening, but really with only a couple of days notice, it was announced that Kiwis could then travel to Australia and without having to quarantine into certain states. And there are further conversations happening about green lane connections between other countries at the time, in time. So I guess the point there is that there are conversations happening. We just can't put a solid timeline on when things can open, because they could happen tomorrow, they could happen in 3 months' time. You just don't know. So I think it's something we've ultimately accepted for now, but now there's a real push, a real momentum moving forward to actually get some guidance and to actually strategically think this thing through. So that's sort of the positive part of it. Of course, where does that all leave, the outbound industry and the partners that you guys have all worked with for such a long time? I know that many of you have emailed about, companies, minimizing, reducing, losing staff. I thought before we go on, I thought it'd just be important to sort of explain, how the governments here in New Zealand have provided an economic response to the pandemic that's ultimately allowed us to, maintain the economic shape of travel businesses at this time, and really keep, key businesses, retail, wholesale, airlines, and so on afloat. And really it also allow us to strategize during this time as well. I won't go into too much detail here, but just, as a rough summary, wage subsidies in Australia have been extended through to March 2021. That's helping, businesses maintain staff. It was the same in New Zealand, but I believe it's just concluded. There's also been significant tax reductions, write-offs, interest-free loans that are really helping with cash flow. And, for, the tourism industry, retail agents specifically in New Zealand, they actually set up a $47 million fund guaranteeing commissions for refunds and credits secured by travel businesses. And there's a real big push in Australia at the moment by AFTA, our Federation of Travel Agents, to get a similar scheme set up by the Australian federal government here. So all in all, these subsidies are helping travel businesses maintain their shape as much as possible during this time and really help them strategize for the recovery. So just a quick top line of, what's happening with various segments in the industry itself. Firstly, the airlines. I know there's been a lot of news about Qantas saying they're not flying internationally for a long time and so on. And I think the key point here is, just like many businesses, they're working with what they do know, not with what they don't know. Their focus has to be on domestic at this time. And it's all about cash preservation so that when the time is right, when they can start strategizing properly with international, they have the ability to do so. And, I think a key thing here, again, with Qantas, with Virgin and so on, they aren't big global centric airlines that we see around the world. They operate, based on Australian movement. And because of that, they really only can plan on the information that they have on hand at this time. So, Qantas has been in a good position, and with domestic tourism and New Zealand tourism recovering, I think they're going to be here, and they'll be one of the quick ones to recover once that border strategy is released. From a retail travel agency point of view as well, of course, they're focusing on domestic bookings and domestic strategy at the moment, but they're really placing, the leaders of our retail networks are placing a huge amount of pressure on lobbying governments to come up with strategic frameworks to opening up the international borders. So with the government subsidies in place, they're able to maintain their shape while also starting to strategize for the international recovery. And similarly, in the wholesale market, similar sort of pattern to what I just discussed with retail. And what we've actually heard, which is extremely exciting, and I'll just talk about this a bit later, but we've actually heard some really strong bookings are being received for 2022, late 21 and 22, as people utilize their credits or start to, take advantage of wanting to book that, bucket list trip. So they're really preparing product for international return as well, with government subsidies able to help them maintain their shape. The cruise industry has obviously taken a massive hit during this time, but again, what we're seeing lately is we're hearing, and again, I'll present on this in a sec, but we're hearing of some incredible sales figures for international cruises with, value-laden deals, allowing people to hold on to credits with risk-free deposits and bookings. So the cruise industry is really taking the risk factor out for the consumer, and as a result, we are seeing some pretty strong results there as well. From a media perspective, we've actually heard, led by home experiences, many publications are seeing boosts in ad sales, and in particular, online viewership and readership. Of course, we know before travel sections are inspiring and coming up with really new ways to link destinations with stories. So think, cooking stories or homemaking stories. They're really pivoting towards this sort of new environment, and it's been quite interesting to work in the PR space during this time and find new and creative ways to tell the destination story. And then lastly, from a consumer perspective, we know that there is dreaming, there is longing, and believe me, in Australia and New Zealand, there is a lot of waiting. The pent-up demand is intense and really roaring to be let loose. So to bring to life some of the positive things that are going on, we just wanted to highlight some key examples, that despite the challenges, there are some little sprouts of hope going on, and these are all things that have happened very recently. Firstly, about 3 weeks ago, Adventure World just reported extremely strong demand for late 2021 and 2022 bookings, as I mentioned sort of previously before. So that comes on particularly from an older demographic feeling like, they don't want to waste another year. They're cashed up and they've got, they want to travel and they want to get these bucket list, trips out of the way and secured and booked. Adventure World's actually reporting that, they're running out of inventory for late 21 because of the demand that they're experiencing. So that's been really, really encouraging. Also from a product point of view, Luxury Escapes, who presented a few months ago with our Date and Destination Week, they are actually increasing their staff at this time. They're hiring new people in the United States to grow their US product offering. And again, they are focusing on the international recovery at this time as well. As a whole, We are seeing weekly numbers that are confirming that luxury travel is in high demand. 5- and 6-star properties here in Australia are selling out. There's actually even a rise, which was kind of unheard of in Australia. There's a rise of actual private flying. I know it's probably more common in the US, but in Australia it isn't. And we're seeing that grow in popularity, and new companies are actually emerging at the moment to highlight that, which is quite incredible. Going back to what I mentioned about cruise before, Hello World, this was, I think, just last week, sold in a matter of days, $35 million in cruise holidays. Pent-up demand is there, and that was mostly international too. So again, taking the risk factor out for consumers, there's still money being circulated here, and people want to travel. Specifically for the USA, one thing to remember is that the Pacific route has been one of the most profitable in the world for a very long time, both for passengers and cargo. Delta, United, they're still flying here. And Qantas and Virgin have both stated their intent to fly again as soon as it's commercially viable. Virgin even said that even though they went into liquidation, and they were having issues before the COVID anyway, but they said that once they start international flying again, Sydney to Los Angeles was going to be their number one focus to refly. So it's incredibly viable route once the demand is there. For the first time, this is sort of looking at more of the momentum towards the strategic framework. For the first time, our key tourism and travel bodies are working together to develop the framework, that they'll work with government to implement and approve our borders safely reopening. So CATO is our Association for Tour Operators, CLEAR is our Cruise Industry Association body, and ATEC is our Travel Council. And we're seeing daily just, progressive talks about how we can safely reopen the borders and keep the country safe at the same time. And the great thing about that, and the seeing that that's worked, is our politicians are in fact listening. Bill Shorten is the leader of the opposition party here in Australia, and he led a heartfelt 15-minute speech in Parliament last week, really bringing the plight of an industry on its knees to the national stage. And there is a real feel that the powers that be are listening. There's a momentum happening at the moment, so it's kind of exciting to see that kind of come to fruition. And finally, Gate 7 ourselves, we are getting involved. We're partnering with Carry On, Evolution, CATO, I mentioned before, with what we're calling the hashtag What's the Plan campaign. The movement wants to place pressure again on the government's lack of a plan, pushing a solution based on measures that could support opening up borders through rapid testing, contact tracing, isolation protocols, travel with care protocols, and clearly outline what the thinking is and the requirements are for opening up. And we're very proud to be a part of that. I suppose the whole point here is that it's easy to say, well, our borders are closed indefinitely, and that's that, when there is so much changing daily, so much unknown, and so much collective conversation happening from organizations and bodies that recognize that, we really must learn to live with the virus rather than shy away from the world, for the good of the industry and for the millions of people that are employed by it and rely on it. So that's just some positive notes. I'm about to hand over to our Director of Marketing, Tony Lon, to go through our final stage of our Keep the Lights On program that we presented on last time. And thank you again to all of you who were active and assisted where needed. I just want to talk you through some of the highlights of what we did over the last few months. Well, firstly, we implemented a full data destination week, which was actually so nice to connect with all of you again and have some really nice conversations and touch base. Over that week, we had 4 plenary trade partner presentations. We had over 60 attendees and ran 55 one-on-one or group sessions with industry buyers and contacts. So again, thank you for being a part of that, and I hope you enjoyed and got a lot out of that. From our resource centre point of view, which Tony's going to talk about in more detail, we've been madly updating that on your behalf. We've run 5 rounds of updates during this time, which have all been communicated via eBlast. Our list size has grown and grown and grown, which again, Tony will talk about. But average size was just under 8,000 for our sendouts, with a really strong open rate. And not forgetting public relations and the media as well, the same thing. We've had some really great engagements there. We did, again, 5 rounds of updates communicated through our database of just around 350 key Australian media, Australian and New Zealand media and journalist contacts that we manage. And from a social media point of view, we also push your content out on several social media posts across Facebook, LinkedIn. And we've also set up new Facebook communities for the trade to facilitate some in-depth discussions about your destinations and happenings as well. From a public relations point of view, Tori and her team have been very, very busy. We've sent out, on average, about 3 pitches per client per month. We secured from that 20 pieces of coverage during that time, with a reach of just under 14 million. And got some, fantastic results out of that as well. So while all of our sort of free keep the lights on programming really now has come to an end, we would love to offer you the opportunity to keep that ticking over if you have the resources to do so. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my friend Tony. So Tony, all yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tristan, and hello, everybody. So just to talk really quickly about the Resource Center, since we've launched back in February, just over 6 months ago, this has been one of the top performing pages on our site, and that's even rivaling the homepage, which is really exciting. As Tristan mentioned, we have really seen a pretty sizable increase in our list of contacts. Right now, we're sitting at just over 9,000 travel trade contacts, and a really good lion's share of those are retail or wholesale agents. On the media side, we've got 349 contacts, which, despite some of the fluctuations in the environment, that's still an increase of 50 people, which is pretty awesome. Cool. So for anyone who maybe doesn't remember or hasn't seen the Resource Center in a little while, just to give you a bit of an update on what we're pushing out there, we use our What's On and What's New section to help promote hotels, attractions, or other reopenings. And we use our FAQs to answer those commonly asked questions that our journalists or trade contacts might have. It's a great opportunity to promote different trainings, events, or itineraries that you have. And we also use it to promote inspiration through imagery and story starters that our PR team uploads. We do amplify all of that content across our social channels, our new agent Facebook groups, and it's just really exciting. We think about how serendipitous it was to sort of launch when we did, because as more people have been furloughed, as hours have changed, and there's that uncertainty in the environment, the Resource Center has really given us an awesome opportunity to connect with those journalists and those trade contacts when they want and how they want. And that's been, while email is always going to be a great channel for us, that this is just another way that we're kind of meeting people where they are and when they want to be met. So as Tristan mentioned, there's going to be a little bit of an opportunity while we have been managing those updates for you. Starting from November, we're going to open up the opportunity for you to take over managing those updates. So when we send out the recording of this webinar, I'll make sure to include some pretty specific instructions to have a representative from your destination get in contact with me, and I can set them up with a template and some instructions so that we can keep updating that Resource Center for you up through, I believe, March of 21.
Can I just interrupt there for a second, Tones? Just to clarify, of course, all of
So, as Joe mentioned, to all of those of you who are still with us, thank you so much. And we will do everything in our power to continue to deliver awesome work and results for you. For those who aren't in a position to continue, we completely understand. We can only say thank you so much for everything. And we can only hope that we'll be together again soon, whether it be here, there, with me, on a golf course somewhere, on a plane, or anywhere we might be. We just want to take this time to say thank you. You're always a part of the Gate 7 family, but we understand about so much uncertainty right now. And with that, we'll probably conclude. And if anyone has any questions, we can open up to all of you. So thank you for joining us this morning. Anyone have any questions? Are we all good?
Tristan, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, fabulous. I just wanted to let everybody know that what Tony was saying about the Resource Centre, of course, if you're still our paying client, we take care of all of that for you. The point there was just for those of you who are no longer able to be with us, we just wanted to offer that to you as a way for you to continue to stay connected with the market if you should choose. But of course, for everybody who's still our paying client, we will be on top of that for you.
I have a quick question, Kristen. It's Jennifer.
Of course, I know it's Jennifer.
Hi, guys. So I know that we've been, I mean, Qantas, clearly they're not the only airline from Australia, but I think we were on some of us were on the Brand USA Europe Week this morning. So we talked to a lot of, Delta, AKA Virgin. So a lot of people are kind of starting to almost predict when borders might be lifted. I think it's a little interesting how we can predict that, but I just thought it was interesting. I've heard a lot about it the last few days, just on early with Europe. So do you guys have, I mean, if you had your crystal ball, what are you thinking maybe for the US? And then also what overall is the Australian sentiment about traveling and flying? Because the US sentiment for flying is getting a little better, but still definitely challenged, clearly with the safety. So I'm just kind of curious the state of mind in Australia for that.
Joe, do you want to talk about your prediction for border?
Do you want me to get a
conversation? You've been part of the more
that crystal ball out.
Look, sure, I can take that question. So, Jen, December 1.
Great.
December
Okay.
1.
See you the second,
everybody.
See you December 2nd.
Look, we have taken a very conservative, like our countries both have taken a very conservative stance, right? We've taken very much a health first stance. There's no question about that. So I don't see that radically changing. I think the key to all of this, let's just discount vaccines because, the vaccine talk, to me, it sounds a little bit like witchcraft. Even if we had a vaccine tomorrow, it's going to take forever for that to really make a big impact, I believe. But I think this is all about protocols, proven protocols, and those kind of frameworks around those protocols. And, actually Rodrigo, who's on the call now from Los Cabos, he was just telling us this week they're testing something in Calgary. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Rodrigo, but they're testing something in Calgary. Actually, perhaps you could speak to that, Rodrigo.
Yes, thank you very much, Joe, and it's a pleasure to talk to you all. In Calgary, they are starting November 1st a pilot program where every passenger that arrives from international destinations is going to be tested, a PCR testing, and they have to remain for 48 hours in their place. But after that, they will receive an email with the results, and if it's negative, then they do not need to continue the 14 days quarantine mandatory. So I think that type of things are going to start reactivating the industry overall.
Yeah, so I think the key point that Tristan made, I think you made it really well, T, is that if I'd spoken with any of you a month ago, I would have said, oh my goodness, I can't believe we're not even talking about New Zealand. Like the talk of the bubble to New Zealand, it actually just died. We stopped using that term in our socials and everything because it would have made us look like we were out of date and we were still talking about something that was happening 2 months ago. And yet then 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden on the news, you hear, oh great, well the bubble's starting in like 2 days time. So I think there's a couple of things. There's a lot of discussions going on behind closed doors that it must be on purpose that the politicians aren't communicating that. I can't imagine, I don't know why they're not communicating it, but there are definitely a lot of discussions going on, and the frustration there is that the framework around which those discussions are being had is not being shared. But certainly I believe that as these protocols and systems are being proven in various places around the world, then that's something that we will adapt. I think I'm personally very disappointed in our lack of innovative thinking around that. But I guess it has been all encompassing to just try to keep the country healthy, or keep the countries healthy. And as T was also saying, there really is now mounting pressure, like, you know, tangible pressure, you can feel it, of, okay, fair enough. I think the industry's being very careful not to sound like we're dismissing the health concerns, because whenever you start doing that, then it just gets, you know, extreme and divisive. But, you know, always very respectful about those health concerns. But even within those health concerns, even within health being the priority over and above economic concerns, you know, we still have these economic concerns, and let's get that framework where, you know, we can increase, it's not increasing the risk appetite if there's a framework around it and we know what these protocols are. So look, it's kind of, it really is impossible to say. But with things like this being tested in Calgary, and with the mounting pressure to really deliver what that program is, you know, I'd be really disappointed if we hadn't at least got the framework, you know, within the next 4 or 5 months, like have that framework. And then I guess it depends, you know, it will be bilateral agreements then. So it would be like, okay, well, if that framework is agreed to, and this thing that Rodrigo and I have been talking about, let's get direct flights to Los Cabos. Why not, right? So if that happened, well, great. If Los Cabos could agree to that and the Australian government could agree to that, fantastic. The same with flights into LAX, the flights into San Francisco, flights into Dallas, Fort Worth, wherever it might be. If there's mutually agreed protocols, then I think that sort of paves the way to shorten these quarantine times. There may well still be the quarantine times. There may well still be the need to be able to tell somebody, you know, as they're at the airport about to leave, no, sorry, you can't go, because this test has just come back and you're sort of in the grey area, whatever it might be. But at least then that opens everything up. So sorry, Jen, I know I didn't really answer your question, but that's because it really would be even worse than looking into a crystal ball. It's
I get it, Joe. It makes perfect sense. But just the other piece real quick, because I don't want to keep everyone up. Do you have a sentiment on air? Is there any stats on comfort with it? Because there's a lot of conversations about the middle seats right now. People aren't selling the middle seats, and they're going to start to sell the middle seats probably end of the calendar year. And the sentiment goes down. Right now, people are pretty comfortable, like about 50%, 54% are not comfortable, but the other almost 50% are comfortable flying right now, but they like the comfort of that empty middle seat, which is going to be going away by most airlines here by the end of the calendar year, give or take. Do you think it's the same in Australia, or not even an issue?
No, I can speak to that. I'm someone who's flown during this time as well. I can tell you domestic routes here in Australia are full. And there's, you know, once the states reopen to each other, and anyone who knows, by the way, just on a side note, anyone who works with Penny, she's very excited because she went on her first flight. You all know that she's our frequent flyer star. She's on her first flight to Adelaide today. She's extremely excited. Our domestic flights are full. The middle seats are sold. I travelled during some of our lockdowns in New South Wales, and the plane was completely packed. It's not really a conversation point here, and I think a lot of that has to do with the idea that we've kind of not eliminated, but really minimised the spread of the virus. So, you know, domestically in New Zealand's open as if no virus is there, you know, so it's not a sort of a conversation piece. And I think, you know, when it comes to traveling outbound again, obviously you can't ever say for certain, but, you know, one thing, Jen, which we've always talked about in the Californian Outlook forums and so on, is the resilience of the Australian travel market. We know in the past, you know, whether it be financial crises, you know, viral concerns, war, you know, Australians travel. It's just in our blood. And to not travel because of a concern of the virus on a plane, and more pieces of information are coming out about how the virus doesn't really spread on airplanes. Now, whether that's true or not is one thing, but that seems to be more the rhetoric here. that we read about. And when I've spoken to friends and family, there's no concern about traveling.
That's great.
Our Christmas, New Year period, our summer holidays coming up, I've been looking to travel away and things are sold out and, you know, flights are full. So it's, at this stage, it's not a concern, but obviously we're not on the same sort of level.
No, I think that's good. And also, I think the airlines are doing a great job here too in the US. Of publicly sharing their safety protocols and giving percentages of not being able to catch it. They've done a good medical piece with the media, which is great.
And can I just say also, one of the key things that's happened, you know, another reason as to, you know, the borders, particularly Australian citizens not being allowed to leave, has a lot to do with, again, putting on that quick, you know, shut the door sort of Band-Aid solution, which we came up with in the beginning. And because we've got this quarantine system in place, we've had to limit the amount of, you know, citizens who've returned to Australia because of without having too much pressure on our quarantine system in Australia. And what we're seeing, particularly this month and next month, are those numbers, the maximum allowed numbers to come back into the country, climbing, renewed pressure from all the states to have that grow and grow. So as we get the citizens back and as that conversation continues, that's going to be a big factor in allowing people to travel again. You know, for example, New Zealanders, Kiwis can actually travel. New Zealanders aren't restricted. They're allowed to leave the country. In fact, and this is just a by note, I got an email from a House of Travel North American specialist about a month ago. They had clients who were going to go to California in, I think, November, and their budget, all luxury, high end, their budget was something ludicrous. And when I said to them, you know, well, what they're doing to come back, and that's okay, they just put the money away for quarantining when they return. So we're seeing little shoots like that happening, and I think it is important to just, you know, understand that, you know, those conversations that we're not hearing about have a lot to do with politics, have a lot to do with the states here in Australia themselves. You know, there's a big conversation about certain states taking in a number of international travellers and some states aren't. So, you know, yes, the health concern is there, but the political stuff is probably more of a point here than the health in a way. So yeah. So thanks, guys. I think, are we good? Tori, were you going to say something, or are you good? You're just going to say hi.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to add to your point, Tristan, that I know you mentioned earlier. So from the media perspective, obviously, you know, consumer sentiment is we're just hungry and ready to travel whenever we can. And I think with our media and the journalists that we have and we work really closely with, that's even stronger. So those journalists are so passionate about what they do. They are really just hanging on for any, you know, border opening. So I think even so, you know, in the media landscape, we're seeing that even more, that hasn't really deterred, you know, their efforts. And as you pointed out earlier, Tristan, those titles we're seeing, you know, Traveller just doubled in size. It's still very small, but with extra advertising support lately, it's doubled in size just on the weekend. We hosted a domestic for Mill just recently, and just the, you know, the journalists' enthusiasm and desperate, you know, to get anywhere, it just showed that I think once those international borders open, we'll be fully on the FMIL hosting front again, which is really positive to see. So those journalists during this time have, you know, they may have diversified into lots of different areas. A lot of them have come out with podcasts, or, you know, they've taken up, just as we all have, you know, random hobbies that they've never thought they would do before. But there's certainly, you know, once those borders open, I think, you know, it's actually, while it's been awful, it's also been quite an exciting time. And as you also said, Tristan, you know, we've seen so much change in that media landscape. It has actually been quite interesting, and we're excited to see sort of where that goes and working with them moving forward. So yeah, it's been interesting. But yeah.
Thanks, Tori. Cool. Hey, and by the way, to all our Southern Californians, or really Californians, bravo the Dodgers and the Lakers, you know, current World Series and NBA champs. Pretty impressive. Seems kind of strange it's all happened during this time, but it's very exciting. So well done.
Hey guys, it's Jeffrey here. Sorry,
Hey, Jeffrey.
for butting in. Hey,
Yeah.
it's really great news to hear, at least from Adventure World, that there's strong bookings, you know, for late 2021, 2022 and beyond. Did they provide any insight as to where people are booking to?
Yeah, a lot of their demo for Adventure World, as I said before, skews older. So they're seeing a lot of, so they're kind of the, you know, those, you know, the things like the Rocky Mountaineer in Canada, which is a big seller for them, Alaskan cruising, African safaris, that kind of thing. So that's kind of Adventure World, has been Adventure World's bread and butter. They haven't gone into much more specifics than that. But that's actually a good point, Jeffrey. We might follow up with Neil. And it's interesting because if you guys were on our data destination week, and our last presentation was Neil Rogers from Adventure World, who really sort of presented incredibly bleak picture of the world. It happened to be the one that I had to drop my children off, and I got messages going, wow. So and he, you know, this is the same company that's now actually quite buoyant and reporting incredibly positive purchases from their client base. So I actually, to your point, Jeffrey, I might get him to try and break that down a little bit more, and would be happy to share that in a thought piece, either directly to you or through our social channels, LinkedIn socials, if we can get a bit more information on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're also seeing, I mean, some of us here in the States have hopped on like Expedia webinars, and they were talking about how globally they're seeing a lot of search for international travel, but that doesn't necessarily mean international travel to the United States. You know, they could be booking, you know, regional travel or to other destinations. So I'd be curious to see if the forward bookings are actually booking to the US as opposed to other countries, you know.
If I can just jump in there, I know during that data destination, Christy Prince, who does their contracting for Adventure World, she was encouraging everybody, all of you, to work with your operators to allow contracting into 2022, because they were struggling to get pricing there. So they certainly were having demand for the States because they were struggling to get the contracts to actually make that possible. So yeah, we will, to Tristan's point, we will circle back and just see how that's going. I think the key point here, Jeffrey, is that they're seeing demand. People aren't game to book for 2021 because we don't know what's going on, but they want to know that they've got something booked, so they've got something to look forward to. So they're taking the leap and going, right, well, we'll book it for 2022. Because the other aspect of this is that because there is a shrinking of the industry, things are going to sell out more, you know. So people, those who know that they want to travel and they know that they have the money, they want to lock it in so that they think, okay, great, if I'm going to have a pretty, you know, the last year I've done hardly anything, maybe for some of next year I won't be able to do anything. I want to book something now, so I've got it on the books. So that's kind of very much a sentiment, and that's why 2022 is buzzing. If we knew that it was safe in 2021 to do it, it'll be buzzing for 2021 as well. It's just because it's far enough out that they believe everything will have settled down by then.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess my follow-up to that is, you know, we're talking a lot about the health risks of traveling and people putting that off, but you know, in the US in particular, has US perception changed since the last time you guys did an update? Like, you know, are people on edge as some of us are with the elections coming up? Some of our cities, you know, speaking on Philadelphia, are going through a lot of social justice discussions and protests. So has that affected US perception with Australian and New Zealand travelers?
Yes, it has, Jeffrey. Absolutely. I would say, you know, the US is at a low point right now. We've got an election next week, and you know, your daily cases at the highest level they've been since the whole pandemic. So there's no question that is certainly at a nadir right now. So the only way is up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, friends. I think if that's it, we will say adios for now. And, you know, we'll follow up. We are recording this, so we'll share this out. And Tony will probably then follow up probably by early next week, Tony, did you say? Yeah. But otherwise, yeah. Kind of not really a big week for the US next week, is it? You guys can just not much happening, is there? Obviously it'll be interesting. We'll be watching that with vested interest. But yeah, stay safe everyone, and great to connect. And please feel free to reach out if you want anything else specific from us. We will follow up with Adventure World and see if we can get some idea on that as well. Maybe Tony can share that in his reach out next week. So yeah, goodbye everyone. Chat
Thanks
soon.
everyone.
Bye.